waiting for the attendees to join. Okay. Okay, so hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar on my CPE. My name is Kate Jones and I'm joining from Houston, Texas. I hope you're safe and healthy, and it's my pleasure to be your moderator for today's webinar. Firstly, I want to make sure your audio and video are working properly and you can see the screen and hear the sound. Please let us know in the chat panel. Also, do let us know where are you joining from. That is city, state, or any part of the world. So, okay. Cannot see any responses till the moment. Okay, see Frank is joining from Georgia. Okay, thank you so much for confirming. Now, before we proceed, I'd like to thank you for choosing my CPE as your continuing education partner. Also, we have started a social initiative. For every credit that you receive on our platform, we donate 1 meal to an underserved under our 1 credit 1 meal program. So thank you again for supporting our wonderful cause. One more important thing, everyone, to obtain credit certificate, it is required as per the regulations to remain in the session till the end and answer all the polling questions. An evaluation form shall be sent within 24 hours of completion of the webinar if you have answered all the polls. And as we all know, this is an interactive webinar, so please feel free to put your questions in Q&A panel and the presenter would be happy to take them on the go or towards the end if the time permits. Lastly, if you get any technical issues, please feel free to reach us in the chat panel or email us at support@my-cp.com. Just for your reference, we have also given you the instructions in the chat panel. So now then, everyone, let's move on to the another part of this session. Yes, the presenter for today's webinar, we have Mr. Drew Stevens with us. Mr. Drew Stevens is a CEO of Stevens Performance with over 35 years of professional business experience, working with both Wall Street and mainstream businesses. He provided 3 instant methods that lead to personal transformation, top line growth, and business success. He works with founders and senior leaders of middle market organizations to scale the business and transform it into wealthy, profitable organization. Due strategic planning and revenue expertise lending have led to assisting organizations in achieving over $11 billion during this 25 years of tenure. So without any further ado, Mr. Dew, the floor is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kate. It's my pleasure to be here. Good morning, everybody, and I want to thank my CPE for having me on today. I'm here to discuss with you the human side of estate planning, things that many that are in the business really don't talk a lot about, seem to be more implied than anything. So what I really want to focus on today is not really the technical components, although I will supply some of that content just for those that are new to this particular subject so that I can get everybody on the same page. But more importantly, I really want to talk about what that human side is, the psychology of estate planning and what goes into it, how as professionals, assuming that all of us, those that are here, are delivering estate planning news, what needs to happen in this particular segment. And it's an interesting dialogue. It's not one that's often discussed. And I think it's one that needs to be discussed. And I think you'll find it most enlightening. We have a couple of different ways to interact with each other today. And so what I want to ensure that you all know how to utilize and why to utilize it. We have a chat window, which you'll all have access to at some particular point in time. And the rationale for that is so that you can ask me questions at any time. If there's anything that you missed, if there's anything that you'd like me to repeat, if there's a term, if there's even a suggestion that you have, please do let me know. I noticed that there's a couple of folks that have already logged in who have said, hey, I'm here. And so what I'd like to be able to do is those that are attending here live with me today, if you can put in some of your goals, some of your objectives into the chat window, that would be wonderful. The second thing is that I will ask some polling questions as we get going, just to try to make it more interactive and introspective to help bridge some of the dialogue that we're going to have with each other over the course of time. And in addition to that, I will be asking questions along the way. I'll ask you to use the chat box, may ask you a poll question along the way. Just quick observance, get your suggestions, anything of that nature. We have audio, we have video. There's a lot we're going to be doing here in the next little bit. So I thank you for being here with me. So let's get started. What I'd like to do right now is go through just some very quick logistics, if you don't mind. I think it'll help us all get on the same page and give us a rationale for why we're here. And the first thing I'd like to do anytime I start a topic like this is I like to address 3 questions that you're probably asking yourself at any particular point in time. First of all, why are we even talking about this topic right at this particular time? Why even bother? Why have it? Well, number one is that not enough people really protect themselves. They don't protect themselves as individuals, and they really don't protect themselves as family members. In fact, even if you have a business, I know that many individuals that happen to have their own businesses really don't spend a good amount of time, or perhaps even a better word, invest a lot of time talking about estate planning, simply because of a number of different reasons, and we'll talk about those in a little bit. But this is a topic that we really have to have. We have to have it because, number one, probate in and of itself is an absolute nightmare. You don't want to have to deal with that. Number two, there are a lot of estate taxes that go into estate planning if, in fact, you have what's known as intestacy, which is you're dying without a will or any direction whatsoever. And number three, we're still, to a certain extent, in the midst of this global pandemic. There are people that have become disabled. There are people that have, unfortunately, have perished from it. And in many instances, there is no statistic because nobody is keeping the statistics on it. The fact is that people are dying and becoming disabled because of the pandemic, and they should have had estate plans in place to help with directives and to help understand. And part of that is the psychology of it. And that's really what we want to talk about today. The second question that I want to address with all of you is, why me? How did I get here? Why is it that my CPE asked myself to get in here? Well, there's a couple of different things. Number one, I have worked on Wall Street since 1985. So I have well over 30 years of experience in this particular field in terms of financial advisory, in terms of wealth management, in terms of estate planning. I'm also a licensed insurance and health producer, and I work with an organization within the United States in order to produce financial advisory and retirement planning and estate planning. And while I talk to you, I'm also in the midst of getting licensure in the securities market. To that extent, I have also been in the business field for well over 37 years, helping small to mid business owners restructure and turn around their businesses. I help to transform a number of businesses that are struggling on a day-to-day basis. In addition to that, I've written 14 books. I've been a keynote speaker. I've also been heavily active in delivering webinars for platforms like my CPE, and I'm very honored to be here and help you all out today. And then the third question is, why are we even discussing this now? Why are we concerned about it? Why should we even talk a lot about estate planning? Well, a couple of things. Number one, we have a new president. Anytime we have new presidents, we have new policies. And that president was attempting to put new taxes in place to help fund, and still is helping to fund, the new infrastructure plan that's in place, the new social spending plan. And as he was looking to create those taxes, there was going to be some changes to the estate tax. As I sit here delivering this webinar for you today, that has at least subsided for right now. At least for the first year of office, there does not seem to be an impact to any estate taxes whatsoever. But, and I underscore that, that is something that could come up at some particular point in time. Another thing is that we're still talking about student debt. Student debt has been deferred because of the pandemic until the end of January 2022. At some particular point in time, student debt's going to come back into it. And believe it or not, student debt does not go away when you become disabled. Student debt does not go away when you die. It still needs to happen and be paid off. And it's just a matter of who is going to be responsible for that. Something else to be considering is the fact that we have 14 to 28 million businesses that are small businesses in the United States. I have a program that I've done here on my CPE called Business Killers. And one of the things that we talk about in Business Killers is that people run businesses and that is their retirement. They say that they don't have enough time to look at retirement. They don't have enough time to look at estate planning. And that honestly is a very poor approach to things. We know for a fact as individuals in this field that do that preparation, do the foundations of estate planning, that a lot of folks don't like to talk about disability. They don't like to talk about death. But you know what? We need to discuss it. It is very, very effective. And what you don't want to have happen is similar to if you have watched the show that happens to be on one of the streaming services called Succession. It's about a family-run business. Dad's 80 years old. Dad is getting up there in age. Dad is getting ill. He's had a UTI and other issues associated. Apparently, at one point on the show, he had a stroke. And with 3 children looking at each other, or actually 4 children looking at each other, trying to determine what the course of action would be, that's similar to what happens in your life. Without having a proper course of action, no one in your family is going to know what to do. And the only thing that they're going to be left with is a business that's not functioning and trying to get an evaluation on it to sell it. And more importantly, whether it's individual or business, the estate taxes that the Uncle Sam and the state is going to want from you from your passing. So it's those sorts of things that's why we want to have this conversation now. Now, as I said to you, as we get started, what I'd like to be able to do is get some interaction from you. I'd like to get you thought provoked in this particular session, and I want to make this as personal as I can. So I'm going to ask for 2 things here. Number 1, if you could use the chat window and tell me some of your goals and objectives for today's session. And as you're doing that, I've got a very quick question that Kate is going to help me with right now. And I'm going to step to the side real quick.
Okay, so everyone, the first polling question is up on your screens now. And please choose a response and hit the submit button to register your response.
And this is the first sense of interaction with us today. So Kate's going to step you through this. We will have 3 of these polling questions as we go through, and this is the first of 3. And as she's helping you here, if you could please vote on what are the 3 goals that you have for today's webinar. I've already started that process. You know, even with or without the chat window, you're free to use that and let me know a little bit more of what you're looking for.
Okay, last 3 seconds. And thank you so much, everyone, for submitting your responses. And Drew, it's back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kate. And a lot of you would like to learn a little bit more about estate planning, and that's fine. What I'd like to be able to do is help you with that, but also help you a little bit with the psychology behind it. As I get involved in this session with you, I do want to remind you of one thing, that the information I'm about to provide for you here is not written or intended to be any specific tax or even legal advice. I'm not authorized to give tax or legal advice. And so therefore, those of you that are listening to me, whether it is live or recorded, I want you to know that you are encouraged to seek advice from your own tax or your legal counsel. And anybody that's on this session today, that whether it's live or even recorded, that are involved in the estate planning process, should work with an estate planning team and include your own personal legal or tax folks. So that's a little bit about what I wanted to make sure that I have for you. Now, as we get started, let's start with the easiest, because some of you are writing in right now. I see that Frank is asked to learn more about estate planning and my experience. And so let's go into a little bit of this right now, and I'll give you some examples along the way. The very first thing is to really start with, what is an estate plan? Why even have it? What is it really about? An estate plan is a collection of documents. That's all it is, that protects your assets and your personal property. It's one of those things that you need to be thinking about in terms of your life. So when we look at things such as assets, we're talking about automobiles, we're talking about homes, and I'll get a little bit more active in this as we get through. But the fact is that an estate plan is really about collecting everything that you have as an asset. It could be your jewelry. It might be things that have been bequeathed to you from your grandparents, such as I had happened to me. I had received jewelry, I had received stocks, I had received bonds, those sorts of things, and it really collectively puts everything together. I do have a booklet because of one of the organizations that I work with as an insurance provider. And what we're able to do as well is we put in ideologies such as having an idea of what our expenses are, having an idea of what our digital footprint is, utilizing social media, websites, those sorts of things, even emails, so that should something occur to us where we have some sort of a disability, or perhaps unfortunately we perish, at least people have access to our digital footprint in addition to our physical footprint, so that they can make any alterations away from the fact, because you don't want anybody stealing your identity. It is something that does happen quite frequently. Now, while I am talking about estate planning, and while I am having this conversation with you about estate planning, there's probably something in the back of your mind. And as Frank had asked a little bit more about my experience and learning more about estate planning, Frank, I'm going to tell you that I actually had this thought many years ago before I got into business and before I even got into the insurance part of it. And that is, well, when we talk about estate planning, it's really about rich people. When we talk about estate planning, it's really about those that have homes or those that have very expensive automobiles, the expensive being, let's say, over $65,000, $70,000. Those that are able to go on vacation often and have something ridiculous like $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 in the bank. Well, no, estate planning is for everyone. Everyone from the low, the middle, and to the high class. We'll do it that way. Anyone and everyone that works here within the United States is a citizen of the United States and has some type of asset, whatever that asset is, whether it happens to be a digital footprint, whether it's about savings, whether it is about real estate, whether it is about automobiles. The fact is that they own something. And so more than rich people need to develop an estate plan. So my time with you today is not only to discern what those documents are, but to get into your head a little bit. And for those of you that are professionals that speak to individuals, as I do every day, letting you know a little bit about what's in your consumer's head or potential consumer's head, and how to break some of that ice, how to alter the gap in between what I tend to call buyer's resistance and seller's resistance. And that's a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. Let's start with the easiest. There are 7 reasons why people hate estate planning. There really are. There are 7 reasons why people can't stand it, don't want to talk about it, don't want to have any conversation about it, nothing. Number 1, some people are going to say they're too young and I'm invincible. Well, as I deliver this for you in the last 3 weeks, I know of, because one of them happens to work with my daughter. My daughter is a BSBA, and she has a woman who she works for. Her son, who is 15 years of age, was involved in an incredible traffic altercation approximately 2.5, 3 weeks ago. If I recall, it was the Tuesday just prior to the Thanksgiving holiday. He went out with a group of friends. They were staying at somebody's house. They left all of their cell phones in their friend's house. They went out for a drive because they were going for a party. They were returning from the party at 4 o'clock in the morning. No one knows how, but the driver of the automobile somehow lost control of the car, swerved, hit a tree head on, wound up killing himself and two other individuals in the car. The car burst in flames, and my daughter, who happens to know who works with this woman, her son was involved. He helped to get someone out of the automobile. He and this young gal were the only two survivors. Now, you may say to me, well, wait a minute, Drew, they're 15 years of age. Should they really have a will? Well, you know what? I'm sure they have assets. I'm sure that there was money put away into an account. I'm sure that there was money, there were computers, there were other things. Now, yes, they're not of age. Typically it's 18 or 21. But the fact is that these are the things that happen. And no one's too young. No one's too invisible in order to do some of these things. And so that's one of the things that we want to be able to keep in mind. Number two, people are going to say that estate planning is a lot of work. Well, it's really not a lot of work. I happen to have with me an estate planning guide, and if you guys want, I am more than happy to give you an estate planning guide as a handout in this seminar. Just remind me before we leave, and I'll put it into the chat window for you. But here's something that is quite appealing to you. It really doesn't take that long. It's a few hours worth of work, but that's because the fact that what you're going to need to do is get some documents together and get some valuations on those documents. I mean, you should always know how much you have and where it's at. So that's one thing you really need to consider. Something else is that there's no trust between an attorney and a tax person. And a lot of that is what I want to talk to you about today. Part of the reason why you are not trusting tax people or attorneys is because you haven't trusted them in the past. Maybe something happened to you. I've got a true story to tell you. Part of the reason why I do what I do, and I say part of the reason, but a major part of the reason I got involved with what I am is not only because I work with businesses, and it made a lot of sense because I'm a fiduciary to them, not only on the qualitative basis, but a quantitative basis. And that is the fact I got screwed by a tax person. I got really bad advice. And so what I wanted to be able to do is help those that got really poor advice from someone else. And so I'm here because I have that, and that's why I want to create that relationship with you. But the part of the reason why people don't do the estate planning is they don't trust attorneys. They don't trust tax people. I get it. We approached, I'm not rich enough, but the fact is that there's something else, and you may feel that you don't have enough assets. Well, any assets are still assets just the same. So I want you to be thinking that you have to really start documenting those assets so that you know what they are. Another is people just look at death and they say, heck no, next subject, I want to talk about something else. I am going to be 60 in February. And I have lived a good life. I'm hopeful that I live another 60 years. But here's what I want to tell you. When I was 18 years of age in high school, and unfortunately it happens in these high schools every now and again, someone gets into a tragic accident or a group of friends go out, they get into a tragic accident and they perish. And that's exactly what happened. The reason why I say this is because in high school, I had a chemistry teacher that I was taking at the time where there was a tragic accident. 6 individuals were in a car, all my age. We all went to the same school. They went to a party and they died in a tragic automobile accident. And he said, Mr. Kopp, who was the chemistry instructor, you know what? You all need to know that when you're born, you start dying. You need to live every moment and you need to cherish every moment, because the fact is one day we're all going to die. You know what? When I was 18, I didn't want to hear about it. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to think about it. When my grandmother died and I was all of 11 years old, I didn't want to think about it. I couldn't stand looking at the casket, all of it. But you know what? It's part of life. It is what it is. We're all going to go at one point. We're going to meet our maker, and we have to have these conversations, even though we don't like them. It's like anything else. It's like changing a bad habit. It's like trying to drive on another road when another road is under construction. The fact is that we have to have these discussions because it helps not only us, it helps our family, it helps our children. To that extent, some people will say, well, I only have one child. and therefore I don't have any children. Well, what about your wife or husband? What about your significant other? The fact is that you will need to take care of them at some particular point in time, and that the estate planning process is part of that. Unfortunately, especially if you have older children that are 18 plus, you would hope like heck your children survive you as a parent. But there are times, unfortunately, as I've been mentioning in some of my examples here, is that adults are going to outlive their children. Well, that doesn't happen in every instance. And so these are conversations that we should have. Stuff is expensive, and people will have said to me, oh, come on, Drew, estate planning is a lot of very expensive. It's thousands upon thousands of dollars. It depends on who you talk to. It depends on what your assets are. And it depends on what you're attempting to do with estate planning. If you have trusts, if you have heavy investments, things get a little gnarly at times, simply and more complicated because you have more assets. But that would be a good thing because you have a larger estate to settle. And that's why we want to have these conversations. I have also heard people say, you know what, I don't like my family. I'm not leaving them anything. You still need to create an estate plan because at some point, whether even if you become disabled, you're still going to have to pay taxes at some point, and you're still going to have to keep in control of what your finances and assets are. And last but not least is either A, I don't have enough time to do this, or I have way too much time because I'm only 20. I'm not going to retire. I'm not going to die. I'm not going to become disabled until I'm 40, 50, 60. Well, that's not necessarily true. And the fact is that we need to have those conversations now. Putting it off is just a way of procrastinating. And many people have even said, I don't have a retirement plan. I don't have a 401k, a Roth, or an IRA. Why even discuss this assets? Because you still have a home, you still have a car, you still have checking and savings, and all of that is important to you. So those are those 7 reasons. And Frank actually asked me a question up here. And how do you approach an older family member that wants to avoid this topic? She has properties in 2 separate states, no estate plan in place. What I would say is very similar, Frank, and it's a wonderful question. And thank you for asking me of that. And that is simply this. Part of this is psychological. And so as I go through, I'm going to keep this question right at the top of mind because I want to be able to approach it. Hopefully these 7 reasons are giving you a little bit of impetus, but I've got a few other things to tell you as well. And maybe this will help mitigate some of the negativity that you're getting. Many people will ask me from time to time, where do I start? Where does this go? How does it happen? Well, you want to start with your assets. You want to start with your home, your jewelry, your automobile, your cash, your savings, your expenses. You might even start where some of your investments are. With an older family, Frank, what I typically say to folks is, look, why don't we just do this? Do you have an inventory of your assets? Do you even know what expenses that you have? Because there's something I want to share with you in a little bit that I think that's going to help with the conversation. But what we want to be able to do is we want to take an inventory. And the reason being is because we know 4 things in life. Number 1, based upon the inventory that you're going to take with me, we will have an understanding of what your lifestyle is. And if your lifestyle is crimped in a way, maybe we can help you with the assets that you have to uncrimp it, because that will lead us to something else, and that is providing you some more liquidity. Maybe you would like to be more liquid, and a lot of the things that you have right now are tied up in assets, and maybe we can make some of those assets liquid. We know that individuals want to live a long time. And so what we'd like to be able to do is alter the lifestyle a little bit so that we are not infringed upon, and maybe some of those assets will give us the liquidity that we're looking for to have a little bit of a better lifestyle. But more importantly, depending upon whether they have children or not, they can create a legacy. Now, some people, like I said, with the 7 issues here, they may say, well, I don't like my family. I don't want to, I don't have any beneficiaries. I don't even want to think about it. I'm only 50. I'm only 60. Maybe they're 70 years of age and they still don't want to think about death. This is not really thinking about death. What it's really thinking about, and what I do is I take conversations about insurance off the table. I don't even use the word. I don't even use estate planning. What I say to individuals is simply this. Let's create a plan that gives you some liquidity, not only now, but in your latter years. What we know is at some particular point, you're going to need income. And so what we're looking to do is make sure that you have enough income when in fact you do want to retire. That's number one. Number two is that even as we look to create some legacy planning here, we want to make sure that you have enough in terms of medical expenses. And I'll get into some of that in a little bit. So hopeful, Frank, that some of this is helping to give you a little bit of a teaser as it was to start with. Once you get your assets down, then some of the psychology that's also in place is who are you going to call? Now, we could be whimsical here if you remember the old movie Ghostbusters, and that is who you're going to call. But the fact is that I would suggest, and you bring up a good approach. How do you approach an older family member that wants to avoid this topic? Well, have you spoken with friends? Have you spoken with other relatives within the family themselves? What have they said? Is there somebody that is closer to this older couple that maybe could get to them a little bit easier? Maybe they're putting some sort of an obstruction there. Maybe you don't have the relationship that you want to have. The fact is that on the latter three, especially an attorney, a tax advisor, an investment advisor, there are times where these are individuals. They're individuals by title, and they're only going to get their businesses from people that they know. It's not going to be from cold calling. It's not going to be from advertising, any of that other stuff. But the fact is that it does really get down to trust, and it does get down to respect. And if there's no trust and there's no respect, and there's no relationship. So what I often say is, look, if you are talking to an older family member and they don't trust you, who in the family do they trust? There's got to be somebody there. The fact is that, and this really gets into the psychology of it. Look, we're toying here, we're conversing here with somebody else's assets, somebody who's busted a gut to get that house, busted a gut to get that new car, busted a gut to invest in mutual funds or stocks or ETFs and ETNs and mutual funds, and the list goes on and on and on, right? So the biggest thing that they want to really discuss is getting rid of it. They've worked so hard for it. Why should they get rid of it? All we're looking to do is protect it. That's why we're looking to do this. We're looking to protect it in any which way, shape, or form. And that's why we want to have these conversations. It's really about trust. Here's where it goes wrong. And Frank, maybe this will help you with the question that you had before. First and foremost, it starts with an attitude. What I find is that every now and again, especially if you're meeting with an attorney, if you're meeting with a tax person, if you're meeting with some sort of an investment advisor, I got to tell you something. I work with these individuals, and I'm going to be the first to tell you, I have never met some of the cockiest individuals in the world than in my days on Wall Street. Okay, which is all part of this, because at the end of the day, we're all financial services professionals. And there are folks that wear that hat. And for whatever the reason being, guys, I got to tell you, it doesn't matter if some of these people work at some of these IMOs, such as, I don't want to name them, but they work at IMOs. Maybe they sell one insurance policy every 2 years, but because they made $3,000, they just think that in a bag of chips, as they say. No one needs a cocky attitude. That's where things are going to go wrong. Things are going to go wrong when individuals just show up and they think that they're that in a bag of chips. Look, you got somebody on the other side of the table or maybe across the room, wherever they are. The fact is that, as I said previously, people have busted a gut to get these assets, to acquire these things. And at the end of the day, if you're going to have this cocky attitude, then nobody needs you there. Secondly, it all goes down to personality and behavior. We can utilize Myers-Briggs, we can use DISC, just to name a few of these things, but that is helpful in understanding conversation. There are times where individuals are speaking, and because of the manner in which they communicate, it gets thrown off by personality and behavior. So if there are people that are direct, they don't care if you ask them how they're doing and what vacation they went on. They want to just get right down to business. Direct people just want to know, why are you there? What can you do for me? Get in, get out, and get over. There are individuals that are very personality driven. They love to be at the center of attention. And so the fact is that we need to play into it a little bit more, and they love conversation. They and somebody else who's a little bit more sociable are going to want you to know more about their life, more about their lifestyle, want to get to know you. And if you're that kind of a person that's very direct and want to get down to business, there's going to be a chasm in that conversation. So therefore, you need to ensure the fact that you've got good dynamics going across the room or across the table, that the personalities match up, that there's no gap in the conversation, that there's no gap in the analysis. And once again, that's where things tend to go awry. More importantly, I do my best on these webinars as I'm speaking to you to avoid a numerous amount of cliches and avoid a numerous amount of acronyms. I have been involved on Wall Street since 1984. I don't think that there is an industry more rift with acronyms than financial services, perhaps information technology. In information technologies, you have DOS, you have TCP/IP, you have GUI, you have WYSIWYG, list goes on. Well, in financial services, there is an incredible amount of acronyms, but more importantly, there are individuals that get into insurance, or they get into annuities, or they're involved in stocks or mutual funds or options or cryptocurrencies. And what they love to do is they love to be up over here, Mr. or Mrs. High in sophistication. And they start spewing, or if I may, vomiting, acronym after acronym after acronym after acronym. There's no compassion on the other end of the table. I'm going to tell you right now that the best manner in which to create a conversation with individuals, such as what Frank mentioned earlier, older people that really don't have an estate plan, individuals that need an estate plan, and individuals that really don't want to have that discussion, is really asking questions. When you start to utilize the approach of questioning and getting more conversational about it, you get rid of all of the acronyms and all of the hubris that goes along with it. Rather than tell, you're asking, you're going to wind up with more information. When you get information, you're going to have a better conversation. So the use of acronyms are where things really go awry. And last but not least is when so many advisors, so many financial advisors start to talk about products. They're talking about annuities. They're talking about Roths. They're talking about 401ks. There's no conversation about products. Nothing. I'm looking to understand when I'm with individuals 4 things. Number 1, what lifestyle are they looking for? Number 2, how long do they plan on living? What do they want out of their life? Where do they want to be when they grow up, as it were? Number 3, the liquidity. What is liquidity for them? Where do they need the money to go? And how much of that money do they need on a day-to-day basis? Again, we'll get to some of that. And last but not least, do they have siblings? And do they want to create some sort of a gateway to those siblings? That's all I'm looking for. I don't talk about products in any way, shape, or form. There's no reason to. So that's a good way to avoid some of the hubris that's out there. So where do you begin? What is a good way to go? Quite honestly, and trying to help you all with just a systematic modality of not only where to start in the estate planning process, but for those of you that are professionals that want to know a little bit more about the process, you do this. You start with a will. It's very easy to start. You start with a will. You can go online and get it from a website. You can get a template. They're readily available out there, or you can go to an attorney and have one made up for you. But a will basically is nothing more than ensures what your wishes are should you become disabled or perish. That's it. It's what your wishes are for your assets, your investments, your property when you need it. The fact is that you will have instructions. You'll have instructions for whatever values that you have, your religion, your hard work, your education. I have a PhD. What do I want to do? Anything philanthropic after I go? If it's instructions, should I become disabled? I know somebody that had COVID late last year, and heaven forbid they needed to be placed on a ventilator. You can't speak, so someone who is your next of kin that happens to have that content is able to become your guardian and provide the assistance that's necessary to the medical staff at that time. If you have a child, whether it's one child or multiple children, or heaven forbid, you have somebody that is a special needs child. Well, the fact is you don't want the government stepping in and taking that child into foster care. So the fact is that a will help you to provide that, and provide that without the United States government disrupting the family member. And quite honestly, it helps for future protection from creditors, from divorce, from taxes, all of it. And that's why you would want to create a will. In many instances, a will is a good thing to have as soon as you get married, or when you become divorced and need to change the beneficiaries out, you want to rename somebody else in your will. I know somebody who just recently got divorced, has an autoimmune disease, and we just sat and redid his will for these particular purposes. Who becomes your beneficiary should you become disabled at some particular point in time? As I mentioned before, and Frank, with your question, I'm still staring at it a little bit, and I hope you don't mind. The fact is that there's always going to be resistance. There will be resistance in conversations, and I apologize with the typo that's on the screen. But the fact is the best way to mitigate resistance is simply by listening. You want to ask as many potential questions as you physically can. And the reason why you want to ask those questions is because you'll get more information. I have been in sales all my life. I'm very proud and happy to say that. And what I've learned from selling for so many years is that the more questions you come to the table with, the more questions you're prepared with, the better off you're going to have. And I have actually 125 questions. Those questions are related to objectives, measurements, and value. Objectives. In other words, what are the goals? So I have a series of questions. I have about 20 to 30 questions that I ask related to the objectives that an individual may want to have during an estate planning. So I can at least direct the conversation that way. Some of those goals are how much spending do you do on a month-to-month basis? What vacations do you like to go on? This home, it's a lovely home. When did you buy it? And do you know what the market value of the home is right now? If you have an opportunity to stay here for the next 5 or 10 years, would you, or would you go to someplace else? Would it be more, would it be larger, or would it be smaller? That's how I understand objectives. Number 2, measurements of success. Because once we create a liquidity plan for individuals, notice I'm calling it a liquidity plan, not an estate plan. But then what I'm doing is I'm asking questions of how they're going to measure the success. How will they know that we're successful in developing a plan for them? And number 3 is simply this. What is the value that they will get from having created a plan? How will they feel? What will make them feel better? How will the stress decrease? How will the anxiety going down? How will the fear go away? So when you have those questions prepared, you get to listen a little bit more. That helps to mitigate that resistance. And last but not least, as I said, getting an understanding of personality, truly honing in whether you utilize Myers-Briggs. I'm not asking you to take one of those ridiculous assessments. I'm just asking you to be attuned to it so that your conversations go mildly better. Now, speaking of questions, Kate's going to come back because she's got a second question she needs to ask all of you. Kate, take it away.
Okay, thank you so much, Drew. All right, the second polling question is up on your screens now. Please choose a response and hit the submit button to register for your responses.
And we got a bunch of coming up. And a bunch of you do happen to have qualified plans, which is good. I'm going to assume you know what the difference between the qualified and the non-qualified is, and I'll go through that here in a second. But thank you all for participating in this. Kate, thank you for facilitating.
Thank you so much, too. I'm just ending the board right now.
Okay.
Thank you so much, everyone. You can continue again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you now. Now, as I said, I'm glad some of you know what the qualified plans are. Perhaps you have not heard of unqualified, but the reason for asking is that the qualified plans are things that an employer would have for you as an employee: IRAs, 401ks. You can get your own Roth if you'd like, if you're self-employed. There are also SEP plans, and there's also ESOP plans, employee stock ownership plans, which are all qualified. Those are a little bit different than what are known as non-qualified plans, because non-qualified plans typically are used for senior employee compensation, things like stock options as an example, or even life insurance or types of life insurance that would be offered along the way. The reason for bringing this up is because as you're questioning your individuals, you may wind up asking them what type of qualified plans they have, if they even know. Now, what I tend to do, and the reason for asking these questions, as an example, I had a couple, not too unlike the question that Frank had asked me earlier, where he had two older people and let's do this. When I was approached by their son said to me, especially mom, he said to me, my parents need to talk to a financial advisor. My mom hates financial advisors. She hates, can't stand the excuses that they give. She thinks that they're all a bunch of liars. They're all out to take your money. My mom can't stand talking to anybody. And both of them have retirement accounts, but they have no idea how to look at them, what they're all about, how much money they have put away, nothing. So my goal at the very beginning was to do no more than to create a relationship. So we're on this is very similar to this, a Zoom call, and all I kept doing was breaking bread. And without using acronyms, without going through too much, I said, so talk to me about some of the things that your employer does to put money aside for your future. And so with that, Dad said, I happen to have a retirement plan. Drew, I don't know anything about it. Could you tell me what's going on? And I said, could you get me access to the accounts? And he did. And what I found out is that Dad works for the Teamsters. Dad has a retirement plan. It is based upon mutual funds from a particular mutual fund company. And I happened to look what Dad was earning, which was no more than 1% per day. And I said, here's something, a couple of things that you got to know. I'm not going to talk to you about, I'm not going to go into the nuances of anything. All I'm going to talk to you is about putting money into a bank account and how much you're earning on that money. And this is what Dad said. Oh my God, I'm not making any return on my investment. How do I make more money? And I said, what we have to do is rebalance the account. We've got to do a couple of things to do here and there. Over the course of the next 6 weeks, that went from making 1% to 8.5%. All you have to do is talk in that way, in lay language. And once you start talking in lay language, that trust will be there. I'm not going to say this is going to work in every instance, but the fact is that when you talk to them as individuals, not as a commission check, things will go a lot further for you. And so what I say to individuals is, look, since we're talking about your retirement, let's talk about a couple of things that are going to really help you to become successful. Number one, you both should have a will. And in most cases, individuals that are married do have a will. If they have a will, then they have a beneficiary, somebody that's going to take over for them at some particular point in time. We're cool with that. What I then say to them is, listen, there's two other instances, two tools that I'd like you to know about. They're resources, they're tools. There's one of them, there's not much you need to do other than you need to know about it. And the other is really for investment purposes. And without being too technical, I say, listen, if you don't have a will, then you die in what's known as intestate. In other words, when you pass on, you don't have a will, you don't have a beneficiary, the state becomes your probate officer. The state then will seize whatever assets that they can in order to collect on those taxes. And the fact is, every state is different. So for me to talk to you about New York and New Jersey, Connecticut, Louisiana, Mississippi, Illinois, I can't do that unless I know what the state laws are and where you physically live. And therefore, that's when you should talk to a tax advisor or even an attorney, simply because they're licensed in that particular state. That's all I say about intestacy. As far as a trust, what I say to individuals is trusts are typically used for investment accounts. They're used for savings accounts. Every now and again, they're used for real estate. And what the trust is somebody becomes a trustee. And what they're doing is overlooking the assets that happen to be in that account. And typically a trust is set up with a trustee, and every now and again, there is a custodian to just make sure that things are equal. Without getting into too much definition, what I say to them is, these are some of the tools, or these are some of the individuals that will be required in order for you to have a decent estate planning idea. And what I say to them to carry the conversation forward is, look, let's look on the negative side for a moment here, because I think it helps to do that. Number one, if you die intestate, as I said, without a will, then what's going to happen is, look, you're going to say you're gone, and it's not a big deal for you because you're gone. But the fact is that when you go and you go without a will, there's going to be unbelievable fighting amongst family members. Now, look, you've spent a good amount of time on this earth. The last thing that you want to see is people arguing over mom's engagement ring, dad's couch, this shirt, that pair of pants. And folks, it gets ugly. And I don't know how many of you are listening to this where that's happened, but I got to tell you, it gets darned ugly. So a good way to get around that is with wills and beneficiaries. Number two, if you have minor children, then a guardian is going to be appointed by the court if you don't have one. And the last thing that you want to have happen is for you to pass on, heaven forbid, and your children now have to go into foster care because there's no will, no beneficiary, and no one named as your successor. This would be especially bad if you have somebody of special needs. Depending upon what the special needs are, the last thing that you want to have happen is that child going into someone else's home without knowing everything that's wrong with them. And I also suggest the exact same thing for individuals that have multiple marriages and blended families. You want to have clear lines of delineation of who gets what. I had somebody recently who mom passed on. He thought he was, and mom was pretty well off. Mom owned or dad owned, and that's how she got it in the as a beneficiary. Dad passed on. She got all of the money from dad, who was a former automobile dealer and had a good amount of wealth. Well, the mom passes on, and the son, the only son, thinks he's going to get the money. And grandma said, not going to happen. I'm giving it to my grandson. And dad wound up with nothing more than an apartment, I think it was. And the son wound up with, I don't know, $500,000 or $1 million. Very, very difficult when things are willed off. Here are some of the documents that I often tell people that we want to have in terms of estate planning. Number one, we talked about the will. I'm not going to go into that. There is a revocable living trust. And if you are placing your assets into a trust account, then you want to have either a revocable or irrevocable living trust, depending upon who that beneficiary is. Now, here's the deal. If you do have an irrevocable trust, then you're going to have to go back to the trust, depending upon the qualified plan that you have. You'll have to go back to that plan as well. So the fact is that the trusts and wills are all revocable at some particular point in time, but you have to look at the documents and the way things were filed. If in fact you say, I need to change it, you change it for a divorce or something happens in the family. I also suggest giving somebody a durable power of attorney. That could be an attorney, him or herself, or it can be somebody who enacts as your legal counsel at that particular point in time, should you become disabled, should something horrific happen, such as DNR orders, things of that nature. I also suggest having the exact same thing for healthcare, where somebody can be able to have a power of attorney in your health. So you have one for your assets and another one for your healthcare as well. And as I mentioned before, I happen to have a booklet where you can put all of your digital asset trusts together. So your Facebook accounts, your Twitter accounts, your website, your email, where you can create your path to all of your digital assets. And the reason why you would want to do that is because, heaven forbid, somebody steals your identity when you're long gone. We've heard enough about some of the voting irregularities because of people that have passed away and identity stolen. Now, the reason why all of this is being talked about here is because ultimately, and really the focus of the conversation when I'm talking about estate planning is on 4 ideals. And you're looking at them right here in this particular chart. If you're only listening to me, then I have a 2x2 chart set up. And what it says is simply this: guaranteed income, guaranteed expenses, non-guaranteed income, and non-guaranteed expenses. This is an easy conversation to have. It's an easy conversation to have for estate planning. It's an easy conversation for investment purposes. It's an easy conversation for annuities. The list goes on, and here's why. We know that as you get older, we're going to have guaranteed income. That's going to be our salary. Every now and again, it could be whatever side hustles. And we also know that we're going to have, at some particular point, Social Security and Medicare. Depending upon social class that we're in, we even may have some Medicaid unless we really need it. But the fact is we know what that guaranteed income is going to be. And we also get guaranteed income because maybe what we have done is placed an annuity to the side. Maybe we've invested in real estate or the stock market. We have that income coming in, especially if it's rental property. Every now and again, we're going to get non-guaranteed income. That could be income from winning a bonus. We can get non-guaranteed income where we do a side hustle and we just don't know where that money is coming in. But at the same time as we have income, we know we have expenses. Guaranteed expenses are going to be mortgages unless the house is paid off. It's going to be timeshares or vacation rentals. It'll be boats, motorcycles, automobiles, student loans, utility bills, and even certain minor medical expenses. But every now and again, we know that we're going to have non-guaranteed expenses. We may have that vacation that just pops up suddenly. We may have to go on a forced trip at some particular point. We may have a medical condition that requires immediacy. Whatever the case may be, we know that growing up, we're going to have non-guaranteed expenses, and we need a plan in place to take care of that. And clearly, an estate plan is the way to go. Now, listen, folks, I have just a couple of minutes left. So before I do, I've got one last question that I need Kate's help on to ask of you.
Okay, thank you so much, Drew. The third voting question is up on your screens now.
Take a second and vote in. I'm hopeful that you're finding the information here exceedingly helpful this morning. I'm trying to go as slow as I can and address as much as I can with such a dense subject here. We have about another 5 or 6 seconds until the poll closes.
Okay, and thank you so much for submitting your responses. Drew, the floor is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, and some of you said you believe that estate planning is a big investment. It's actually not a big investment. Not having an estate plan is a big investment. And the reason being is because when you perish, you will have to pay taxes. Now, qualified plans, when you perish, will be placed and will affect the amount of the estate tax that you're going to have to pay. But in 2021, the personal, just so you know, the personal federal estate tax exempted people that were over $11 million. That is not, that has only in 2021, that has not changed since the Trump era and Biden coming in. But there are some people that will say, well, wait a minute, taxes are ridiculous and estate planning is a lot of money. Let me go through this. Number one, estate taxes are not a lot. Many people believe that estate planning tax or estate tax, excuse me, are at 40%, and they're not at 40%. What I've tried to give you here is a chart that indicates what estate taxes would be based upon the amount of taxes that you would have to pay. And you'll see it goes from 20 all the way to about 40%. So depending upon your income is the amount of taxes, or not only your income, excuse me, but the amount of your assets and what those assets are. So it's not always a 40% rate, but do know that there will be taxes based upon what those taxable assets are. And it roughly goes from, people have said to me, I really don't have anything. Well, maybe you're not going to get taxed up any more than about 10%. If you have several hundreds of thousands or up to a few $1,000,000, yeah, it's going to be about 40% in order to get that tax. In addition to that, some of the other fees that are going to come out of this would be any tax or legal advice. Whatever an attorney is going to charge you or whatever an accountant's going to charge you. But let's just say, for example, they are going to invoice you, say, $2,000 or $2,500. It's going to be the best $2,500 you ever spent, because it's going to set up a will, it's going to set up a beneficiary, it's going to set up a durable power of attorney, it's going to have directives should you become disabled or die, it'll have directives for children, rather than placing them into foster care, or perhaps directives for special needs children. The list goes on. Now, I just came up with an arbitrary number. I don't think it's $2,500, but it's something that you should do. Your best practices to get through this, number one, would be to meet with individuals and just start to have an understanding of the plan. If you want, I am more than happy to get to my CPE, the estate planning guide, and you can use that and start doing it yourself. There are also forms that you could download off of the internet to start the process yourself. Or here's the other thing. If you can't find any of that information, then email me. Just simply call me and I can get that information to you at no cost. There shouldn't be any cost, because what I'm here to do is to help you. And what I want to then be able to do is give you those forms. We could talk them through on the phone. And then what there would be is just an identification of where you want to place your money at some point, so you have the liquidity needed to make your future plans. That's what you want to be able to do. My advice to you is just that: create an action plan, do something about it. If you're working with individuals that are skittish about it, then get rid of the language that talks about insurance, get rid of the language that talks about product, and let's talk about how to help people with a lifestyle, longevity, and a legacy. Listen, I cannot thank you enough for being here today. Hopefully you got some great information. I want to thank Kate for helping me facilitate this session today. And I really want to thank my CPE for allowing me to do this particular segment for you, something I'm really passionate about, something that I really want to help you so that you can help your clients, you can help your family members around a topic that is exceedingly sensitive. Thank you again. God bless and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you so much, Drew, for giving such enlightening, insightful, and one of the most informative sessions. It was amazing, and you made it really interesting by sharing those examples, and we are glad to have you on our platform. Lastly, for all the users, an evaluation form shall be sent within 24 hours to only those attendees who have answered all the polling questions, and it is required for you to complete the evaluation form in order to receive the credit certificate. We would request you to rate the webinar and provide us your feedback about the platform, speaker, content, and the webinar in the evaluation form. Also, you can follow us on social media so you can stay updated about our latest webinars and industry information. Also, share with your colleagues. If you need to review the recording or webinar, or if you have any further questions, please reach out to us at support@my-cpe.com, and we will provide you the link to view the recording and will assist you further. Thank you so much for being such a wonderful audience, and keep coming back. Stay healthy, stay safe. Thank you so much, Ju.
Thank you.